On the show today, we have guests Orinthia Harris and Jill Flanders. Dr. Orinthia Harris is a passionate educator and dynamic speaker with over 20 years of experience. As the founder and executive director of STEM Merrily, she empowers educators and students with innovative tools for success in STEM and early childhood education. Dr. OH is a sought-after speaker at national conferences where she shares her expertise in STEM. Dr. OH's thought leadership is reflected in her publications, including co-authoring Little Learners' Big Hearts and its accompanying Learner's Guide. She also serves as a researcher and facilitator for Yale's Compassionate School Leadership Academy. Jill Flanders is still learning, a lifelong teacher after 27 years as an elementary principal with 15 years in education and 10 years teaching a number of degrees and experiences. She is still fascinated by natural science, brain development, music, art, theater, and child development. In her co-authored book, she focused on current children's literature that addresses anti-racism and elevates the marvelous differences that make us unique and yet alike. Jill loves working with children and colleagues, discovering interests and questions, and finding new solutions together. Get ready for an amazing episode.
I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-created curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go. Jill and Dr. O, welcome to the Time for Teachership podcast.
Hey. Thank you for having us.
Hi.
So excited you're here. I'm really excited to talk about, I have both books on my table here. So we have Little Learners, Big Hearts, which is the kind of the teacher version, if I've got that right. And then the Advancing Empathy and Equity in Early Childhood Education, the leader kind of companion book. I've read them both. I'm excited to dig in. Is there anything that you both kind of want to frame before we jump into the questions today around the book or kind of what's on your mind?
Oh, please do, Orinthia. You are really good at setting the stage.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us. We're excited. I'm glad you read both books and enjoyed both books. You know, everything we do is centered around the heart. And what compassion and empathy and equity really look like. So just want to center this conversation on, we're really interested in moving from compliance to compassion. And that's what both of these books are really all about, especially in an age where words like equity and inclusion are being demonized. We really want to set the conversation that the basis of all equity work is compassion, which is a work of the heart. So hopefully in this conversation, you'll hear our passion for that come through versus anything that might be considered divisive. And I don't understand why these terms are being demonized, but I want to acknowledge that they are and just say from the get, this is really about compassion. It's not about compliance. It's not about checking a box. It's about, what does advancing empathy and equity really look like when it comes to our teaching practices?
That's so well said, Orinthia. And by really focusing on early childhood education, we're clear that 3-year-olds don't come to us alone. They come to us with their families. And the conversation then is extended, not from what just happens in your classroom or your program, but to what we can encourage around compassion and empathy for families and how they interact in the world. And I think the other theme that you're going to hear from us today is that it's not okay to do nothing. We're really going to suggest some easy things that can happen by the end of the program, and then some more challenging things that educators and parents might want to choose to do to elevate compassion.
Love that. And as I was saying to Jill right before having on, Dr. O, that I, as a parent of a 3-year-old right now, really connected on the parent level as well as the educator level. So I'm really excited about that piece. Feels really valuable. We're already using some of the strategies and just thinking about the approaches. So it has been very helpful. Thank you. And I think one of the big questions I want to start with, so we'll get really big and then we'll come back to the book, but I really love Dr. Bettina Love's words and the way she says things. And so she talks about freedom dreaming, by saying their dreams grounded in the critique of injustice, which I love and I think is really connected to your books. I'm curious from each of you, what is your kind of big dream that you hold for education?
Oh, absolutely. That every child sees themselves reflected somehow in wherever they are in the world. So one of the easy first steps that we talk about is just taking that big view of a classroom or a program or even your home. And are there books, are there toys, are there pictures and posters that reflect who you are in your family? What's your culture? We'll talk about that a little bit in personal terms for us, but it's one of the easiest first steps is just take that big scan of what's going on around you. So absolutely connecting to Bettina Love in terms of, are you reflected in your daily world?
That's good. I think my big dream is that teachers would be mindful in all of their interactions with students and that their interactions would be based on compassion, which would take emotional intelligence on the part of every educator, and then being able to regulate their own emotions because kids can take us there. We say, oh, it's just a 3-year-old, it's just a 4-year-old, but they can take us there. And so my big dream is that teachers everywhere would be mindful in their interactions with students, knowing that when they interact with students, they're actually encoding something in their brain. And I would love for teachers to consistently encode in the brains of students, especially young students birth to 5, that they're worthy and that they belong. And that even if they're getting on my nerves and I'm at my short fuse, I have enough emotional intelligence to know, and self-regulation to know when I interact with this child, I am encoding something in their brain. And I would love it for it always to be to encode, you're worthy, you belong, you matter, even if you're getting on my nerves.
That resonates deeply. Thank you for that. That is really good. And I think so. I think this might be a good time to introduce the Heart or Heart Plus framework that you all talk about, because I think that really grounds and connects to what you're talking about. Just one of you want to maybe start and the other can jump in?
I'll jump in. And so this came about as we were doing this work, and teachers were saying, what can I practically do to be anti-racist, pro-human in my practice? Like, we learned about it, we're learning about, but what can I do? What does that process look like? And so I came up with this acronym HEART because it really is, equity is a work of heart, right? Anti-racism, it's all a work of heart. And so the acronym is, the H is for hope. You have to start with hope. We're not going to end racism in our lifetime, but you can end it in your classroom. And if you don't start from a point of, I can do something in my classroom, in my lifetime, in my generation, then it's just going to seem too big and you'll get frustrated. And again, we talk about how hope, wishful thinking is not hopeful living, right? When you have hope, hope has feet, which means I'm going to do something about it. And so you have to come in not with the mindset of the savior complex, and also not with the mindset of being, oh my gosh, this is too big, but with the mindset of, in my classroom, in my time, in my lifetime, even if it's just this one family, this one student, I can make a difference. So you have to start with hope. And then you have to go to the education piece. You have to educate yourself, and we say self-education, about your families, your students, and what they're dealing with. What is the suffering that they're dealing with? It is not their responsibility to, it's not their responsibility to educate you. You have to educate yourself because they're the ones going through the trauma and the, all the things. And so a lot of times when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, and Black people as a culture were experiencing a lot of trauma. Like, I didn't watch the George Floyd tape. I didn't watch any of it. And my kids didn't watch the news or any of it. People were coming to me saying, well, what can we do? What can we do? It's almost like if you lose a loved one and you're grieving and people are asking you, what should we do? What should we do? No, just pick up a mop, bring a casserole. Don't ask me, right? And so if you're dealing with students and families that are dealing with suffering, you have to educate. What is their history? What are they dealing with? What are some of the things that I can do? And once you educate yourself, then that comes to the A, which is the acknowledgement. You have to acknowledge the suffering that people are going through. Because oftentimes we see it, we educate ourselves with it, but then we want to turn the blind eye. You cannot abolish what you will not acknowledge, right? And so now that and you cannot acknowledge what you do not know. So now that we know, right? Because we've done the self-education, let us acknowledge that this is an issue. And then let's go to the R. Let's make a resolution. What am I going to do? I resolve to blank. And we have a ton of resources in both books of practical things that you can do. Your resolutions. These are things you can do with your staff, with your students, with your families, with your own children. We give you a ton of resources. So you can say, you know what, for this school year, I resolve to do this at the first staff meeting of every month, or I resolve to do that. And then the last T, the T is for teaching. We subscribe to the definition that teaching is nothing more than a set of interactions, right? And so are our interactions based in compassion? How are you teaching? How are you interacting? I did a session yesterday, and we talked about moving from compliance to compassion. If a student says, I need water, and you throw the water at them, or you give them water in a dirty glass, did you really give them what they needed? Yes, you resolved, I'm going to give water. But did you give water in a way that is receptive, that the student could, literally drink the water? So that T is so important because we have to remind people that teaching is nothing more than a series of interactions. So with that resolution, yeah, we're going to do this staff meeting once a month, and we're going to dig into the activity at the end of chapter 5 because it's on bullying and we really like that. How are you presenting that activity to your staff? Are you just throwing them a worksheet? All right, guys, let's do this work. Like, no. And then we added a plus. We said heart plus. The reason why we added the plus is because we understand that every school, every family, every community is unique. And so the plus means, what are you going to do to make this cater to your school, right? So maybe we have 1 through 10, and you may need number 11. Or maybe we have 1 through 10 and 5 doesn't resonate with your building. Okay, then don't do number 5. A lot of times we get these resources and we want to use them as like robotic, and we cannot do that. And so that's why we added the plus for schools to be mindful that this has to be catered to your population, because it's so important that we honor those whom we serve and we don't throw stuff at them that may not fit into their culture, their tribal culture, their whatever their culture, their religious culture, whatever it is in the building. So when you're looking at the heart, again, you start with hope. Then you self-educate, you acknowledge the education that you've gained, you make a resolution, what are you going to do? And then when it comes to my teaching, my interaction, how am I going to do that? And I'm going to go to plus. I'm going to make sure this works for my people.
We're also,
That was a lot. That was a lot.
there you go. All of the training in 10 minutes. We're also really cognizant that it's not always in any kind of sequential order. Yes, you can spell the word heart, but you may need to jump ahead. You may need to go back and revisit. You need to read the room, in other words. And from my perspective as a former principal, that's probably the number one building block. It's starting with, as Dr. O said, the relationships you're building, the communication you're having, getting to know your program, your community, your faculty, and your families, and what are the things that will resonate with them.
I love it. There's so much in there that is just like so connected. I love even just foundationally that teaching is a series of interactions, right? And this idea that it is dynamic. It is not, I'm going to throw this stuff at you. Like, right? Like, literally, I'm not going to just literally throw it at you. Yeah. Okay. This is resonating deeply. Thank you all. So I think I want to make sure we get to the leader pieces. So I'm trying to pace us on time too. I'm curious, while we can like be in the teacher space for a minute, if there is a particular strategy or kind of aha moment or like thing you want to lift up from the book, and I can share a couple of mine if you want to like kick it off with that.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. I'd
but
love
so
to hear
I liked the children's literature. Having a 3-year-old, I immediately got Strictly No Elephants, which has become an immediate favorite. So thank you for that recommendation. But also, you know, all of the analysis of children's literature and how do you look at what's on your shelves, and is it just animal characters, right? So I mean, there's so many pieces to that. I also just loved a lot of the strategies that made total sense to me. So like the sweet words jar, loved. Like the calmness elevator, just like the rainbow breathing. There's so many things we're already doing in my home now because of this book. So thank you. Are there favorite pieces for you all from that classroom lens, the teacher lens?
The children's literature, I think, is probably the least controversial method to begin in many, many different layers. So when we talk a little bit more about the leadership part of this, I would also begin there with children's literature. In my heart, I would love to see any principal starting off faculty meetings with one good children's book that opens the conversation. I would love to see this in middle school and high school, because the conversations so often have not happened there. But what a way to just open the door. We also in the book talk about taking different paths with children's literature. You can go to Ibram Kendi and start off with Anti-Racist Baby if you really want to jump right in, but you don't have to. There are lots of other choices. And I think one of my favorite things to look at, you mentioned it about the percentages of children's books that are based with animal characters. It takes a little while. You might want to spend some time up and down the aisles, but I've been looking more, more focused on books that have actual photographs of real kids, real families. And this was one that just melted my heart. My youngest daughter is married to a handsome Puerto Rican man, and their two daughters have very different shades of skin. Alina, the oldest, at one point when she was 3 or 4, announced to me out of the blue, as 3-year-olds do, Grimmy, my skin matches daddy's, but Elise, the younger sister, Elise's skin matches mommy's. And you know what? I think that's really cool. And we're both Puerto Rican, but you know what, Grammy? Mommy's never going to be Puerto Rican. So it's like, okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I knew in my educator brain I should jump on this as a teachable moment. Of course, I just sat there with my mouth open and said, yep, you're right. But I found some awesome books that, one in particular is The Color of Us. And when I did bring it home and showed Alina, her first reaction at age 3 was to match her arm to the photos in the book. Now, we should be doing that. We have to have the opportunities for kids to be able to do that.
Hi, this is Leah popping in to share the free resource for this episode, a free video series, How to Choose PD that honors early childhood teachers. You can find it at the blog post for this episode, www.lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/228. Now back to the show.
Absolutely. Dr. O, do you have a favorite strategy or piece from the book?
I would also say the chart that allows leaders to know what books are where on the continuum of the conversation. So leaders are equipped by saying, okay, if I start with Born on Water, here's some of the things that I can do. Here's some of the conversations that I have. And I think the book recommendation and the chart also will help leaders disarm their staff. Because when you hear Born on Water, you immediately, like if you have never read the book and you only subscribe to the news media that is divisive, you automatically are like, no, we can't do it. But if you actually pick up the book and read it and read through it, it's like, oh, this book is really about her being proud to actually be an American, proud of where she comes from, proud of where she is. And the book ends with her drawing an American flag. So not sure how that's anti-patriotic, but with this chart and this guide, it allows our leaders to give them, okay, if you take this book, here's the routes in which you can go. And I think that for me, that was my favorite resource because it wasn't simply a book list. right? Because anybody can give a book list,
Yeah.
but it's a book list that shows you if you're ready to dive right in, turn some heads, here's some books. Here's why, and also here's why we chose to put these books in this category. Because here is some of the pushback you might get by bringing this book up, but here is the conversations that you can have. So we don't leave you hanging with just a book list and say, here you go. And I thought that that resource is super, super helpful for leaders and people who really want to get their staff involved and have staff that are reluctant to do the work because they are buying into the divisive language that is being surrounded in these topics.
You know, and Dr. O really touches on an important part there. This can be incredibly uncomfortable, and we want to acknowledge that. These are uncomfortable conversations no matter where you start and where you lead with it. We've tried to come up with, be sensitive about it and come up with non-threatening, openers. But buried in it is taking the time to do some examination of unconscious bias, to do some reflection with, again, as a school leader or program leader with your faculty and staff. And man, that's going to be hard. And we're honest about that.
Yeah, that's reminding me of like the tiered system of equity supports image that you
got
have.
it.
And so connected to the Heart Plus model, right? I'm thinking about like the education piece, like the info building as tier 1, and then you have the tier 2 where we're reducing bias. I love I guess we'll shift over to leader pieces. I love the kind of decision-making conversations that you have about that. And I think the most interesting piece for me, I think paired with this tiered system visual, was this idea of strategic planning with a healing focus. And I thought that that was really profound because, right, we think about like the divisiveness, right, Dr. O, that you were mentioning. And so I think the healing seems to me to be the path forward. Just the folks in education spaces who are talking about that, is like, it's deeply resonating, at least with me. I don't know about everyone else, but I think that speaks to something that is so counter to what we see in popular media and news programming and all the things that, right, are divisive. And so I'm curious, and I mean, I'm just like repeating back to you things from the book because I just loved it. But I loved that you had the Desmond Tutu quote, who I just absolutely love, about like, we don't heal in isolation. You had the research on like when you add feelings to decision making, it actually improves decisions. I think of conversations I've been in strategic planning conversations where it is so kind of traditional and like authoritarian, and this is the way we do this, right? And we leave feelings at the door and we don't incorporate those into decisions. And I kind of want to like meld all this stuff into one question, which is, can you say a bit about this idea of healing focused strategic planning? Particularly, I'm curious about like how you've had success with folks coming to that, or has there been resistance to folks coming to that, or a challenge from folks approaching it in this way? And what have you kind of done to coach them through it? Sorry, that was a really big one.
The reality is the lack of time to really spend on this. And again, I'm speaking from the perspective of a principal of a public school. It's important to make the time, because it, A, yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. B, it's probably a conversation that has not happened with faculty and staff. And the commitment to, opening the conversation and then supporting the hard stuff as it erupts, because I can actually say that I have had faculty members that have had to leave the conversation, that they just can't manage it. But being, acknowledging that, being open to taking care of yourself and what you need to do, but not giving up. And, we can also tell you this, our proposals here, what we've written about is still, fairly new. We're still working in some pilot programs in some schools with, how did this go? What would you change? What would you do next? And so that's one of the things we're really eager to hear from schools and school leaders and programs about what did and didn't, go well, and how can we add to our conversation.
I was going to also add that you have to make the time, because if you don't, you will be moving forward with broken pieces. So if I break my ankle and I don't allow time for it to heal, it's going to reset, but it'll always be broken. Like I have a finger that you can't tell right now, but I can't straighten it out because I took too long to get the cast. So by the time I went back to do the proper healing, yeah, it's fine. I can move it, but I don't have full use of it. And so I think that's what's happening is we are acknowledging the hurt and the trauma that has happened in our environments. And that's great, right? That goes back to that acknowledgement piece. I think we're doing a better job as a whole in education of acknowledging, maybe not necessarily acknowledging some of the historical past, but I think collectively acknowledging that there is a collective trauma that happened from COVID. All right, I think we're united on that, all right? And so there's this united acknowledgement that there is some healing that needs to happen because of trauma, but there's not the space to make it happen. And so students are self-correcting and healing without the proper, I guess, support. And when that happens, you're moving forward on broken pieces, and there's always that trauma trigger that's in the back somewhere. And when that triggers, things tend to blow up. And so, what healing really looks like amongst students is really allowing them the space to feel safe to express their emotions, to make mistakes, and to be themselves. I had an incident with a student, and actually and for whatever reason blew up, and wrote some really nasty things about the teacher, curse words on his paper. The teacher saw the paper, and took the paper and said, okay, bud, when you're ready to come back, you come back. If you need more paper to write, I'll give you more. The teacher never, and I mean, he called the teacher some things on this paper. And when we were talking about the incident with the teacher, I just was wondering, like, hey, did that not upset you? Did that not make you mad? Like, this is an incident that is principle worthy, okay? Especially some of the things that he said, that they were a little bit racial also, and from, because it was two different races of student teacher. And he said, Dr. O, that's not who that kid is. He was frustrated. We all get frustrated. I'm not going to take it personal. And he just let it go because he was like, that student didn't need a trip to the principal's office. That student needed someone to say, I get angry too. And you know what? He said, Dr. O, at the end of the day, that student came back up to me and said, Mr. So-and-so, I really apologize. I shouldn't have written that stuff about you. And he said, buddy, don't even worry about it. I know, I get that way. And then he said, I say some things to my wife sometimes that I shouldn't say. And so I sympathize. You know what I mean? So I think giving that time and that space for students to really feel safe and feel seen, which means we cannot let the rules speak louder than compassion. We can't. And so that requires us, for teachers, to let go of perfection and really practice self-compassion, and also, how do I connect with my students? And in order for that to happen, like Jill says, you have to give the space. And when I say the space, I mean the space in staff meetings where leadership says, hey guys, I know this, and this is the policy. But if you have a student that this is not their nature, and they're on 100, and you're able to get them from 100 back down to 1 and move on with your day, please don't write an incident report. I'm giving you permission to not report that. Because some teachers feel like, oh my God, I have to report it because that's what they say. And that's what I mean when I say giving teachers the permission to be compassionate, giving them the permission to say, please don't let these rules speak louder than compassion. Because what is the goal of education at the end of the day, right? So what is our ultimate goal for these students at the end of the day? And if we don't put healing back into the conversation, we're going to continue to keep moving forward and not really fully heal to the point where we're able to use all of our, resources to the best of our ability, because we're going to be turning out students that still have trauma that they haven't dealt with, and subsequently adults that still have trauma.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. I'm just like head nodding all over the place. My parenting brain is very into the Good Inside podcast with Dr. Becky Kennedy. And so the thing that's always in my head is most generous interpretation, or MGI. And so I've like tried to practice that. I mean, we could do that out loud with kids. Like we'll get cut off by a driver or something, and we'll just be like, that person must have been in a hurry. I hope everyone's okay. Right? Like, what is the way that we can reconceive like a perceived hurt?
Mm-hmm.
And like you could practice in tiny ways. That would be such a beautiful educational experience if everyone interacted in that way.
100%. And I think it was Thoreau that said, it's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see.
I was just going to say that we've been reading the same things on Facebook today, Dr. O. But Dr. O just did an absolute master class in modeling what we're talking about as well. And this is also close to our hearts, that the leaders that are trying to open up the space and the time for this work are also modeling it at the same time with the other adults that they work with.
Yeah. Oh, that's totally true. Yeah. Right? Because the kids replicate the things that they see us do, right? All the time.
Right. And yes, and yet we're not perfect. I think that's just as important. I mean, we're going to blow up. We're going to say those things to whoever cut us off in traffic, but acknowledging it doesn't. And here's another Dr. O thing. Acknowledgement does not mean acceptance.
Yes.
So applied in a variety of ways.
100%, because they mirror, that children mirror. That's what they do. And what I say is, could things be the way they are because you're the way you are? And what one thing could you change that can change everything? You can change the way you see your students, your staff, and your coworkers. If you see them differently, you will treat them differently. And acceptance does not mean agreement. Right? Acknowledgement doesn't mean I agree with this behavior. Away with this notion that being compassionate to a child somehow means that I'm okay with the fact that they just threw a chair across the room. No, I'm not okay with the fact that they threw the chair across the room. But is me going to 100 going to get them to where I need them to be?
It might actually do the opposite.
They might pick up a second chair. But it definitely takes the way our lenses have to change for how we see our students and also how we see ourselves. Because the reason why a lot of us can't be compassionate with our students is because we're not compassionate with ourselves.
Just going to let that one sit for a minute. Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely true. All right. We have gone a lot of places. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm looking at time. We'll do maybe like a little lightning round here with a few final questions. What is kind of one practice or strategy or even mindset, like just way of thinking about others or about things that you would say someone could start right now? Like, so they order the book, it's in the mail, but right now they want to start and do something while it's on its way. What would be that one thing?
Jill, you go first.
Yeah, I've got about 6 in my head. I'm going to sort through this and start with yourself. I think have an internal conversation. Where are you coming from? What might be some of your internal bias, which is a hard thing to do. It's not the easiest place to start. So then part 2 is the easy place to start is what is the do something that you can do right away. And I will revert back to my children's literature. Find one book that speaks to you.
That's good. That's good. I would say the one thing you can do is try to see it from the other person's perspective. So every time you feel offended or offense or upset or frustration, or your children are getting on your nerves, you don't like your administrator, whatever those feelings that come up that are getting you to a negative state, how might that other person be feeling? Like, what is their perspective? Because at the end of the day, everything we experience is ultimately just our perception of it, and it's not the whole picture. So, can I put myself in your shoes and say, how might you see this? And just simply doing that can bring us back to a state of where we are, a state of calm, a state of where we're not just reacting, right? We're actually processing what is really happening in this situation. Why did my administrator say this? Why did this student go off in this way? What could be happening from their perspective? And start centering others, which is really hard, especially when your amygdala is hijacked and you're in your feelings. But I would say practice perspective taking of others.
Beautiful suggestions. This question is for fun. What have each of you been learning about lately? It could relate to our conversation or just be totally random.
Oh, I'm dying to talk about this. Our focus was on anti-racism, and just because of everything, we were focused on Black children, Black families. I have wandered off into, I need to know more about Indigenous families, Indigenous cultures. And, I'm in Massachusetts. I have connected with educators in the Wampanoag tribe. And there's children's books. Oh my gosh. I have a whole new pile. and just the history that I was not aware of is crushing in many ways, but I'm doing something about it. I am learning.
I have to say, Keep on a Muck is one of our favorite books. We jumped right to that but we did Born on the Water and Keep on a Muck, and we should have probably started with like The Colors of Us. Jump right in.
Jump right in. For me, I've been learning a lot about biomarkers and genetic testing. I recently took a contractual position as the program director for the Color of Wellness, which is a program that's under the Touch for Life nonprofit organization. And essentially what they do is kind of similar to what we do in education, is they go around to conferences and they educate the people in the conference on different types of cancers, breast cancers, prostate cancer, and just educating them in general. I'm learning a lot, but what I'm most fascinated about is the disparities that we talk about in education are also disparities in healthcare. And the whole idea of patient care, bedside manner, how are we giving the BIPOC community access? What are these barriers to access? And as someone who has no background in the medical field, to come into this space and be like, it sounds like we all might be dealing with something similar. It sounds like we all need lessons in compassion and perspective taking, because people are not getting life-saving treatment because the barriers of who they are. And similar in education, where we talk about, there's not a lot of representation in gifted and talented classes, or the overrepresentation of BIPOC students in special education. Those disparities are also happening in healthcare. So it sounds like that this is not an education conversation. I feel like this book can be on the shelves of doctors as well, and nurses, because if teaching is nothing more than a series of interactions, then I would dare to say that when I'm at the doctor's office, them practicing as a doctor with their patients is also a set of interactions. So this tiered system of equity supports in education could easily be a tiered system of supports in healthcare.
100%.
And Lindsay, over time, we have really found that we get it right in early education and early childhood, but we're not really good at talking about it. We know that you have to work with the whole child. there aren't, separate times that you do reading and math and all those things. They're learning everything at once, all integrated and all tied together. So focusing on early childhood, because we get it right there, hopefully will carry on through the rest of education. And as Orinthia said, and in other fields as well.
Fields.
Amazing. Well, thank you both for this conversation. Where can people reach out to you or connect with you if they want? And we'll of course link to the books as well in the show notes.
Well, we're both on all of those social media platforms. Orinthia is much better at it than I am. I take that as generational, and I'm okay with it. If you really want good connections, probably talk to the 8-year-old that's downstairs. I mean, mine's by my name, by Jill Flanders. Through the connections, through Amazon and through the Solution Tree, I think our emails are there as well.
Yep. And you can follow me on all platforms at STEM Early, one word, STEMEARLY, or you can find me at Orinthia Harris on all platforms as well. I might be Dr. O on TikTok. I meant to go change that. So you might have to go to TikTok and you look for Orinthia Harris. You're like, I don't see her. It's Dr. O. But LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, it's all Orinthia Harris, and also STEM Early. So you'll find our content on both pages.
Orinthia and I are both associated with the Center for Educational Improvement as well, which has its own website at edimprovement.org.
Yeah, we're everywhere you want to be.
That's so good. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. O and Jill. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Yay.
Thank you so much, Lindsay.
If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no-strings-attached brainstorm call at lindsayBethLyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.